Here's what happens that can create this reflux issue. When the food comes in, it passes by this little valve at the bottom of the esophagus that meets the esophagus to the stomach, and this valve is called a lower esophageal sphincter, or LES for short. And this valve opens and food comes in, yay, we have food! And then it closes so everything doesn't come back up and burn us. But here's the thing, that LES valve is triggered by stomach acid. So if a person isn't making enough stomach acid to trigger that valve to close, but they're making maybe a little bit of stomach acid, well, now that stomach acid is going to come back up and it's going to burn them. They weren't making enough stomach acid to trigger that valve to say, hey, it's time to close so everything doesn't come back up and burn us. So in most cases, it appears that a person having acid reflux type symptoms is having those symptoms due to not having enough stomach acid. Not because they have too much stomach acid. Here's another ripoff. Let's say you didn't have enough stomach acid and some type of infection came in. And it's set up camp and it's having a great time, and the problem is that the waste from a lot of bacterial overgrowth that can occur in the stomach, their waste product can be very alkaline. And it can make that stomach even more alkaline and neutralize the small amount of stomach acid that you might be making. That little bit that's going to come back up is going to burn us, and it's going to suck. But there's also other possible causes for acid reflux, and a big one for a lot of people is what we call a hiatal hernia or a hiatus hernia. And basically the esophagus goes down through our diaphragm down into the stomach, but sometimes there can be a little tear in that diaphragm and it'll pull the stomach up through the diaphragm a little bit. So the problem is that LES valve that we talked about before that's triggered by stomach acid, that closes so food can't come up, it's right there by the diaphragm. So if the stomach gets pulled up into that diaphragm a little bit and the esophagus is not meeting the diaphragm and going into the stomach the way that it's normally would, then all of a sudden that LES valve can be in a position that won't allow it to close properly. And now even if a person is making enough stomach acid to trigger that LES valve to close, it might not close and they can get some really bad reflux that way.